He called me boy as he smashed my face into the hood of my own car, right there in front of the courthouse, and the statue of Lady Justice like some sick joke. And as that metal burned into my cheek, all I could think was, if I died here, they'd say I must have done something to deserve it. Tell me this before I tell you everything, when the man with the badge becomes the one breaking the law. Who do you think the law is really protecting? My name is Jordan Carter, and this is the story of how a cop in my hometown tried to make me another quiet statistic, and instead ended up triggering something that nearly wiped his entire department off the map. Yeah, that happened. That Tuesday started simple. Too simple for how it ended. I was back in Millbrook, Virginia, the town where I learned to ride a bike in cracked church parking lots, where my grandmother ironed my shirts before school, where my father taught me the rule book for staying alive if you look like me. Hands visible. No sudden moves. Yes, sir. No, sir. Swallow your pride. Keep your life. If you grew up black in a place like this, you know exactly what I mean. I had been in the Army for 15 years. 3 tours. Some things you've seen on TV, most things you haven't, and some things I still cannot say out loud. Officially, I am Colonel Jordan Carter. Unofficially, I run a very small, very quiet unit out of the Pentagon, the kind of team they send in. When "we have no margin for error" is not just a phrase, it is a threat. My day-to-day is secure. Lines, sealed rooms, coded language, and the unspoken understanding that if something happens to me, alarms go off in more than one building. But that morning I wasn't in a sealed room. I was home. I woke at 600 Zeros, like always, laced up my shoes, and went for my 5-mile run through the same streets I grew up on. Cool air, long shadows. That old southern stillness before everybody starts pretending everything is fine. I nodded at a couple of older folks who recognized my grandmother's eyes, even if they didn't quite remember my name. By 8:30, I was showered, dressed, and headed to the VA office to help push some paperwork for a few of my guys who were fighting a different battle now. Bills, insomnia, missing limbs, missing support. Nothing fancy, no motorcade, no government plate. Just me and a black Honda Accord with a worn keychain and a coffee in the cup holder. I pulled out from my street, past Mrs. Washington's blue shutters, the church with the leaning sign, the old grocery with the busted open light that still flashes anyway. It felt familiar in that way small towns do. Charming if you're welcome, choking if you're not. That is when I saw the patrol car slide in behind me. You ever feel your whole body get quiet before your mind catches up? I checked my speed. Perfect. Turn signal. On. Seatbelt. Secure. Both hands on the wheel in plain sight. I teach guys how to move through hostile territory, but nothing makes you calculate like blue lights in the rear view when you're a black man in a town where you know the uniforms better than they know you. 1 block. 2. 3. He stayed there. No pass, no turn, just hanging. I told myself the lie we all tell, maybe it's nothing. Maybe he's going somewhere else. Maybe. 6 blocks later, the lights came on. No siren. Just that silent strobe of authority. I pulled over in front of the Millbrook courthouse, right under Lady Justice in stone, blindfolded, and holding her scales like she meant it. I turned off the engine, put the keys on the dash, rolled down my window, placed both hands up where he could see them. I was not tense, not trembling, but I was locked in. He walked up, slow hand resting on his gun, like it was part of his arm. "License and registration," he said. No greeting, no explanation. I looked at his tag. Blake. "Yes, officer," I said, calm, steady. "Can I ask why I was pulled over?" Sometimes the whole story changes on one sentence. That was mine. His eyes sharpened just a little. He didn't like the question. Didn't like my tone. Didn't like that I was looking him in the eye like we were on the same level. Some men do not say it out loud, but you can see it written all over their faces. "You match a description," he snapped. "What description?" I asked. "Step out of the vehicle." No violation, no broken light, no speeding, just you look like someone I can control. I moved slowly, narrating each motion with my hands still visible, like I'd trained to do in places where people shoot first, because they're scared. I opened the door. I stepped out. I stood tall. I am 6'2". My posture is military, even when I try to relax. And that to him read as attitude. "Turn around, hands behind your back," he said. "Officer," I said, still polite. "With respect, I'd like to know what I did wrong." That was it. He grabbed my shoulder and slammed me onto the hood so hard my breath left me. The metal was hot, burning the side of my face. I heard gasps from the courthouse steps, muted whispers, the sound of someone's phone starting to record. I tasted copper from my lip. His mouth was right by my ear. "Suspicious behavior," he said, savoring it. "And you watch your tone, boy." There it was. If it were you, what would you have done? I swallowed everything rising in my throat. Every curse, every rank, every classified word I could have thrown at him. My jaw tightened. That was the only sign. 15 years ago, I might have said something that felt good and cost me everything. That day, I said nothing. He cuffed me like he had been waiting his whole career for that moment. "Resisting possible narcotics, we'll sort it out at the station," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't resist," I said quietly. "Get in the car." I could have ended it right there, you know. Showed the ID that makes people sit up straighter. Called a number that would have had his sergeant on the phone in 60 seconds. But this feeling in my gut, this anger I'd carried since watching my father stand by his car for an hour while a younger white officer dug through nothing, told me something else. Let him finish this. So I let him push my head down, stuff me into the back of the patrol car like I was trash. As we pulled away, I watched Lady Justice shrink in the mirror and started counting in my head. Time since detainment. Time until my missed check-in. Time until systems I helped design started asking, "Where is Colonel Carter?" Millbrook Police Station was exactly what you're picturing. Squat, tired brick, flickering fluorescent lights, that heavy mixture of disinfectant and old sweat. Blake walked me in like a trophy. No one asked why I'd been arrested. They didn't need to. A black man in cuffs, nice car. Calm eyes. In their minds, the story writes itself. They booked me. Took my prints, my mugshot and my wallet with my regular ID, my keys, my phone, my watch. The watch lingered in his hand for a second. "What's this?" he said. "Gift." I shrugged. He tossed it in the tray like it was nothing. Pattern interrupt. It wasn't nothing. He put me in holding cell number 3. Concrete bench cold air turned up just enough to bite bars that have seen more fear than justice. He stood there holding the keys like a king. "You get one call," he said later, sliding the jail phone toward me. "Use it smart." I looked at it, then at him. My lawyer could have had me out fast. My commanding officer would have had questions. There was a number on that secure phone he took that could have made his badge melt. Every option burning a hole in my brain. I pushed the phone back toward him. "I'll wait," I said. He stared at me, thrown off. "You think someone is coming to save you? You're in my house now. My rules." I met his eyes and gave him a little nod, like we'll see. He walked away, rattled the bars with his stick for effect. "Get comfortable, boy. You might be here a while." I leaned back against that wall, closed my eyes, slowed my breathing. To them, I looked done. To me, the clock was just starting. Here's what Blake didn't know. That phone in his property bin, the one he thought was just some fancy device, was on a secure schedule. I was due at a classified briefing that afternoon, one I had confirmed. When I missed the pre-brief check, a flag went up. When I didn't answer the secure line, another flag. When encryption logs showed my device sitting motionless at a small-town police station for too long. The question changed from, "Where is he?" to "Who has him?" There's a protocol for that. Amber Protocol. I learned later how fast it moved. Inside the Pentagon, my chair was empty. The screens were lit. People with top clearances staring at coordinates they did not like. General Catherine Reed heard the summary, looked at the map, and said, "Initiate Amber Protocol." That phrase gave every relevant agency one mission. Find Colonel Jordan Carter, secure the asset, neutralize any threat. And the threat at that moment was wearing a Millbrook badge. Back at the station, I could feel the shift before anyone said a word. The casual laughter thinned out. Phones started ringing more. Doors closed. Blake came by my cell, less cocky, less chatty. The first time he passed, he tried the same line. "How you doing in there?" I just looked at him. The second time, he had another cop with him. Detective Pierce, the guy who thinks he's smarter than everyone in a 5-mile radius. They stood outside like they were window shopping. "What are we hitting him with?" Pierce asked. "Suspicious resisting. We'll find something in the car," Blake said, like he was ordering lunch. "Find, if you've ever been on the wrong side of power, you know that word." They left. I kept counting. I figured I had maybe a couple hours before the machine hit them. Turned out I was close. At some point, Chief Daniel Dawson showed up. I didn't see him right away, but I heard his voice, big and sure, filling the hallway. He'd been running this department for years, shaking the right hands, stepping on the right necks. The kind of man who believes that as long as he salutes the flag and says law and order loud enough, no one will ever look under the hood. He called Blake into his office. The door shut. 10 minutes. 15. 20. When it finally opened, Blake's swagger was gone. His face had that sick, tight look people get when the ground under their feet cracks. He came to my cell with the keys, but suddenly he wasn't so loud. "Interrogation room 2, he said. "Chief wants to talk." "Here we go." The room was like every other I've ever seen. Metal table, 2 chairs, camera in the corner, that may as well have a sign saying, "Only works when it helps us." Blake sat on one side, Pierce on the other, folder in front of them, like this was some cop show. Pierce started with the script. "We know who you are, Jordan," he said. "Unemployed, weird income, driving a car you shouldn't be able to afford. We found cocaine in your vehicle, high grade." He slid pictures across the table, baggies with white powder, their favorite magic trick. I looked at the photos, calm. "Interesting," I said. "What time did you search my car?" "Around 13:30, he replied. "With a warrant." "Exigent circumstances," he said fast. "Probable cause." I nodded slowly, letting it hang. "Officer Pierce, are you familiar with federal law concerning unauthorized searches of property belonging to certain categories of personnel?" I asked. Blake frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "you two just broke more laws than I have time to list, and you don't even know how bad yet." Blake leaned in close, angry, desperate. "You better listen," he said. "You're signing a confession to dealing. You're gonna say that dope is yours. If you don't, this gets ugly." "Pattern interrupt," I laughed. "Just once short." "Officer Blake," I said quietly. "I think you should know that since you put your hands on me in front of that courthouse, every word you've said has been recorded." He glanced at the camera in the corner. "We control that," Pierce said. "I'm not talking about that camera," I said, raising my cuffed hands just enough to tap my wrist where the watch had been. They stared. "That watch you tossed," I said. "Secure device, GPS and audio feed, straight to Pentagon security. They've heard the slurs, the threats, the talk about planting evidence, all of it." Silence. "You're lying," Pierce said, but his voice had lost that slick certainty. Agent Jessica Garcia, FBI Public Corruption Unit is in the air right now, headed this way. I added steady like I was reading a weather report. When she lands, she's not asking you questions. She's reading you charges. Kidnapping a federal officer, civil rights violations, conspiracy, interference with a national security asset. That ring any bells? Blake's face drained. He looked like someone just told him gravity turned off. Nobody's going to believe you over us, he snapped weakly. We're cops. In about 3 minutes, I said. They're not going to have to choose. Right on cue, we heard it. Helicopters. At first it was faint like a storm thinking about rolling in. Then louder. The building buzzed. Radios lit up. Someone shouted something about federal vehicles outside. Dawson's voice started barking orders that sounded more like prayers. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. The door flew open. A woman stepped in, high eyes like steel. Officers. Ryan Blake. Stephen Pierce. She said, "You are under arrest for kidnapping a federal official and conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. Stand up, now." Yeah, that was Agent Garcia. Blake tried to make a move toward the door. A U.S. Marshal put him into the wall so fast, his whole body folded. Pierce just sat down hard, like someone unplugged him. They cuffed them with the same metal they had used on me. Earlier, funny how that sound hits different when it's on the other wrists. Garcia turned to me. "Colonel Carter," she said. "Are you all right?" I stood up my shoulders, remembering what they were. "I'm good, Agent," I said. "But this place is dirty. You're going to find more. We already have teams on it," she replied. In under an hour, that station flipped from their house to a federal crime scene. Agents pulled files, cloned hard drives, cracked into email accounts. Evidence lockers got inventoried for the first time in years. Cases that never made sense started making ugly sense. Dawson tried to talk tough until someone read him the part of the alert that said, "Any unauthorized detention must be reported immediately." They sat him down in cuffs in his own office. News vans rolled in. People in town came out to watch the same men who had terrorized them for years walk out with their heads down, jackets over their faces, hands shackled in front of the cameras they couldn't control. From there, everything escalated. And I mean everything. My part moved into conference rooms and secure debriefings. I sat with General Reed and Colonel Santos and walked them through every detail. How long the stop took, the exact words Blake used, the timeline of my detention, the phony search, the planted evidence plan I overheard, the racial language, the threats. "Any compromise of classified information?" Santos asked. "None," I said. "They never knew who they had until your people called. Your composure and documentation are the reason we have this case in full color," Reed said, and she wasn't smiling. Meanwhile, Garcia's team opened up the guts of the Millbrook Police Department and discovered it wasn't just a couple of bad officers having a bad day. It was a system. Payoffs from dealers to look the other way. Evidence planted on people who talked back. Asset forfeiture, abused like an ATM. Complaints from black residents buried, mocked, ignored. So here's the twist. Under the twist, my arrest wasn't the story, it was the tripwire. Fast forward a few weeks and we're in federal court. The Millbrook case is national news. Documentaries. Think pieces. Cops defending activists, cheering politicians, pretending they cared all along. I sit in that courtroom in my dress uniform, not because I want to be a symbol, but because my testimony is a piece of the hammer. I tell the jury what I'm telling you now, only slower under oath. How I was pulled over with no reason. How quickly it turned physical. How casually they called me boy. How they talked about finding drugs in my car. How I chose not to call trusted the system designed for someone in my position and let them show who they were. The jury listened to the recordings from my watch. They heard Blake's voice, Pierce's words, Dawson's instructions. They saw the paper trail, the money, the messages, the fake reports. When the verdicts came down, they were not gentle. Dawson, guilty on running a criminal enterprise, civil rights violations conspiracy, kidnapping a federal official. Blake, guilty, heavy time. Pierce, guilty, cut a deal for a long sentence with cooperation. Others went down too. A whole tree of rotten branches. Some folks called it a witch hunt. Some said it proved all cops are corrupt, which I don't believe. What it proved to me is this. When power goes unchecked long enough, it stops pretending it's anything but power. Then came the rebuild. Department of Justice came in with a consent decree. Federal monitors, body cams, real oversight. Old leadership gone. Captain Olivia Grant, one of the only ones who had been filing complaints from inside, was asked to lead the new department under a microscope. I came back to Millbrook about 6 months later. The building looked cleaner. The energy felt lighter. There were new officers I didn't recognize, and that was a good sign. Kids rode their bikes past patrol cars without flinching. Mrs. Washington told me she slept better at night. That hit me harder than any speech. They asked me if I would say a few words at a community event. I don't like speeches, but I know when silence is cowardice. So I stood there in front of that courthouse with Lady Justice over my shoulder, like a stubborn promise. And I told them, 6 months ago I was arrested right here for the crime of driving while black. Today the men who did that sit in federal prison. But this is not just my victory. It belongs to every person who spoke up, every agent who did the work, every neighbor who refused to let this get swept away. And then I told them the part that still bothers me. I said, let's be honest. If I hadn't been Colonel Jordan Carter, if that watch had been just a watch, if my disappearance hadn't triggered protocols in Washington, would we be standing here right now? Or would I just be another mugshot in a system that already decided who I was? Do you think that's fair? Some people looked down. Some nodded. Some got mad. Good. Discomfort is where truth lives. Because here's the controversy. No headline can solve for you. It should not take a top-secret clearance and a federal panic for a black man's rights to matter. It should not take helicopters and national security memos for a small town's corruption to finally mean something in court. I got justice. A lot of folks never do. So if you're still here with me, I want you to answer this in the comments. Not for me. For you. If it were you in that car, with those cuffs on, in that cell, do you believe your story would have ended the way mine did? If you wear a badge, how does this make you feel about the people standing next to you at roll call? If you've lived through something like this, a stop that turned sideways for no reason, a cop who thought the uniform made him God, are you willing to talk about it? Tell me if you think the sentences were enough, or too much, or not even close. Tell me if you think federal oversight is the answer, or if it scares you. Tell me if you've seen departments change for the better, or rot from the inside. I want to hear it all. Push back, support your own stories. Because this isn't just entertainment. These stories are warnings and mirrors, and the more we drag them into the light, the harder it gets for the next Blake, the next Dawson, to work in the dark. If this story made you feel something, anger, relief, disbelief, hope, don't just click away. Drop a comment. Share it with someone who thinks this never really happens. Subscribe if you want more true stories that don't look away from the ugly parts. And let's keep this conversation loud enough that nobody like me has to rely on a secret watch just to prove their own humanity. I'm Jordan Carter. This is what happened in my hometown. Now it's your turn to talk.